Good morning, everybody. It is great to be with you today. Vince Lombardi, arguably one of the greatest coaches in football history, at the beginning of the season would take a football and would talk to his professional football players and say, "Gentlemen, this is a football." Why would he do that? Because fundamentals are where you win or lose the game. Fundamentals are so key and so easy to forget. And you might be thinking, well, come on. They would forget what a football is? It doesn't take much to forget the most important things. Today, with Vision Sunday, we're going to talk about some of the things that you might think, oh, this is so fundamental. Yep, it is. And you might be like, oh man, I've heard all this before. Great. Do you know how many times a football player practices tackling somebody? A lot. They don't just do it once, like check, skills accomplished. They do it again and again and again because the fundamentals are what determine victory. And as a church, we have to look at our fundamentals over and over again. And if it seems repetitive, it's because repetition is the mother of memory. And some might say the father of boredom, but they're wrong. Repetition is the mother of memory. And this kind of repetition is not just so you know things, but so that you know things in your heart. Because it's from the heart that the mouth speaks. It's from our heart that we actually act and live. I can tell what we worship by the things that come out of our mouth, the way we prioritize our time, our energy. That all comes from the heart. And if our goal as a church, of our purpose, our mission, is to help people discover, trust, and love Jesus, then that needs to come not just from the building walls, not just from the program, not from the screen. That has to be something that gets into our heart. And I bet the guys, the first time that Vince Lombardi held up the football and said, "Gentlemen, this is a football," they're probably like, "Oh, come on." But I bet the next year when he did it again, "Gentlemen, this is a football," they're like, "That sounds familiar." So what is our "this is a football" moment? We are a church with a mission. And Jesus, before he returned to the Father, after he laid his life down on the cross and was raised again, before he returned to the Father, he told his disciples this in Matthew 28:18. Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." It's from this passage that we have developed our mission as a church, because we are a church on mission, and our mission is helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus. Helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus. And in this Matthew 28 passage, Jesus is telling his disciples to go make disciples. Go do likewise. Jesus is saying, everything I taught you, teach them. Teach them to obey. Teach them to trust the Lord. Baptize them. Help them to know who God is. Go make disciples. And sometimes people read that as like, oh yeah, Jesus really was encouraging those disciples back then. But what does Jesus tell us in here? He is with us to the end of the age. When is the end of the age? Not yet. Jesus is still with us. The mission is still for us to go and make disciples. The other thing people do with this verse is they say, oh yeah, they emphasize the going. Like, oh, that's a great verse for missionaries who are going to the deepest parts of Africa. They're going to the darkest parts of China. They're going to places where people don't know Jesus in the Middle East, and that's great for them. They're going and making disciples. That's not what Jesus is saying here. It's not just for them. Because the go is not just go away. It's really as you go. Wherever you go, make disciples. We are a church on mission, and we're called to make disciples. And discipleship is not removed from what another churchy term, evangelism. They're the same thing. Because there are people that you know, people that I know, that don't love Jesus yet. And I'm discipling them. You're discipling them. Everybody is a disciple maker. The question is, are we good disciple makers or bad disciple makers? Are we intentional disciple makers or negligent disciple makers? We're all disciple makers. We're called to help people discover, trust, and love Jesus. The relationships that God has blessed us with, those are our mission field. Those are the people who need to hear about Jesus. And you might be thinking, Jason, if I talk about Jesus, that might make people uncomfortable. Yeah, you're right. It makes us uncomfortable because you're also people, right? You start talking about Jesus, and like, what are they going to think about me? I know. But our mission, our love for Jesus, is the thing that motivates us to continue helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus. Whether or not they're following Jesus, we want to start talking to them about what Jesus has done in our life. We are a church on mission. And for years and years, we've been carrying the mission personally. But sometimes it gets hard. Sometimes we lose focus. Sometimes we get distracted. Over the last year, one of the challenges that we have been facing as a church with the Linwood campus and the sale of the Mount Lake Terrace campus and this transition is we've been in a holding pattern and waiting. And I want to apologize to you, Creekside, because I was also waiting. And in that waiting, it's really easy to get discouraged and to get distracted and to forget about the mission. And my hope today as a church is that we would take the mission personally. We are a church on mission. We are followers of Jesus on mission. So these early disciples, Jesus was dead, and then he was raised again. And what did they do? They started talking about it. They started telling people about it. Because if your friend was dead and then alive again, would you keep that a secret? No. You would tell people like, oh, hey, Jesus of Nazareth? Yeah, he's alive. People killed him, got better. He raised again. And the church, Jesus told the disciples to wait and pray. And on this day in Acts 2, we read about this, and it's called the day of Pentecost. And they're praying, and the Spirit fills these disciples as they're praying, and they start to proclaim God's goodness. And there's people from around the world who hear about Jesus and all that God has done. And the Bible tells us that on that day, 3,000 people put their faith in Jesus. And I pray for days like that. I was like, oh man, wouldn't that be awesome? And then I also am like, oh man, that'd be a nightmare. What would you do with 3,000 people? Because that sounds really, really difficult. But the Bible tells us what they did as the early church. And church isn't supposed to be necessarily the most innovative place because the Bible really tells us some really basic, fundamental principles. And so it's like, let's just try to be like that. And so in Acts 2, it says this: they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day, they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. I love this passage because it shows like what the church did. And as a church in the 21st century, then our goal should not be like, let's do something brand new and something totally different. Let's do this. And we've been trying to do this as a church. This is how we've been trying to organize our ministry. And for years, we've had a model that you can see in the lobby. It's this ship's wheel. And we got it from this passage. And the different purposes of the church and the propeller, these different strategies of how we carry out the mission. And that has been a great model for many, many years. And, Pastor Don, he's my father-in-law and, was leading this church for 19 years. And I helped him in those conversations shape that model. But every once in a while, we have to reevaluate our models. We have to reevaluate our metaphors. Because if we don't, our metaphors become idols, and we can't let that happen. So we have to reevaluate our models and our metaphors. And in the spring, we did a series called The Table. Because as we walked through the Gospel of Luke last year, something that I noticed is some of Jesus' greatest teaching was not behind a pulpit. It was at a table. And I started to think, what if our ministry was we looked at it as a table? And I'm going to ask everyone, I know Mark talked about the program, but I'm going to ask everybody, grab the program, take it out, and put it up in the air like this. I want to see every program up in the air. All right, we're going to do a project together. We're going to open it. And it just unfolds like that. I know some of you millennials and stuff like, paper? What? Huh? But yeah, so... I also am a millennial. Okay, open to this page. We got it, guys. All right, cool. Now let's look at this table. First of all, I want to thank Brian Cox and Jeremy Schmidt for helping redesign the program. Doesn't it look great? It looks really good. But this table is simple. And if we're a church on mission, we're helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus. Where does that happen? The tabletop. That mission is relationship. And one of the greatest tools that we have for relationship is our tables. How many of you guys use like a ship's wheel every day? No hands. So far, that's been the response in both services. Now, if there's like a longshoreman or something next service, that'll really mess up what I'm saying, but I'll work on it. How many of you guys have a table in your house? Let me see your hands. All right, okay, cool. If you don't need, I have an extra one. Like, I'll give you a table. But we all use tables. We use tables at home. We use tables at work. In the break room, we use tables as we gather with friends at coffee shops, at restaurants. We use tables all the time. And it's such a great tool for us to remember to take the mission personally. The relationships that we build over the table, those are our mission field. And they could be following Jesus already, so we're helping people discover, trust, and love Jesus. They might not be following Jesus yet, and we're helping them discover, trust, and love Jesus because we are all disciple makers. Are we intentional or not? What holds up the mission? And we see in this Acts passage some characteristics of the early church, and these are our table legs: a life of worship, a life of community, a life of service, and a life of generosity. We see that in the early church. So when we say, like, what should the church be doing? Like, we should be doing these things. These should mark our church as an organization, but they should mark our lives as well. Is worship and community and generosity and serving, are those present in our life? Because that's when people see that church is not just some hobby that you have on Sunday morning, but it's the gospel is something that's changing the way you live your life. When you devote your life to Jesus and start to worship him every day, living in community, intentionally inviting people to your table. So we are evaluating our metaphor and saying, let's move forward, not with the ship's wheel. Let's move forward with the table. So that when you go home today and you sit down at your table, you're reminded that this table is your mission field. And if you have kids at home, these are some of the people you disciple. If you live with roommates, these are your mission field, and you're working together to help them discover, trust, and love Jesus. We are all missionaries. We are all on the mission field. So what do we do with that? With this table, the question then is, are we making room at the table? So there's several different categories that I want to talk about with this making room. The first one is making room for all generations, making room for the marginalized, for people who we know and love, and for the world. Are we making room for them in these different groups? So let's start by talking about making room for all generations. Titus 2, the Apostle Paul is writing to a young pastor who was serving in the city of Crete. And he said this, Titus 2:1, "You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. Likewise, teach the older women to be reverent in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled. In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity and seriousness and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed because they have nothing bad to say about us." Are we making room at the table for all generations? And I love this passage in Titus because it's really showing us a picture of the church. The church should have all generations present because everybody, no matter what your age, needs Jesus. We all need Jesus. So are we making room for all generations? And there's a couple things that we're going to encourage and move forward with. The first one is I want to encourage you to join groups across generations. So when Pastor Mark was talking about that groups catalog, and if you didn't get one of those, take one of these before you leave and look through here. And don't just join a group. If you're not already in a group, don't just join a group with people you know or people who are just your age. Look for somebody who might have a little bit of wisdom to give you or maybe a little bit of energy to give you. Look for older and younger people to work together, to follow Jesus together. So I want to encourage you to join groups across generations. Another thing that we're doing is for the last several years, we have had a 9 o'clock, 9:30, and 11:15 service. And the 9 o'clock service is the Softer Sunday service. And it's a great service. I love that service. We sing some songs that we grew up singing, that we were singing when I was growing up. And some of, like right now, they're singing a song, probably Worthy, Worthy, Worthy. And I'm like, oh, that song is a jam, and I'm kind of jealous that I don't get to sing with them right now. But that service is mostly people who are older and retired. And they are separated from the life of the church. And I know that there are people in the 9:30 and the 11:15 service, some of us here, who are longing for some older people to follow after as they follow after Jesus. There are some folks in these services who are longing for some adopted grandparents, people who can mentor them, coach them, pray for them. And so this Sunday is the last Sunday of the 9 o'clock service. And we're going to invite them to join us at the 9:30 and the 11:15 service. And so I'm going to ask you, you're already in this service. Can you make room for them at this table? Can you welcome them? And if you see people who are like, that you've never seen before, first of all, introduce yourself. Be nice. Invite them to sit with you. Ask them if they're in a group. Invite them to join your group. Because right now, we have 2 different churches happening. And I want to build one church that honors Jesus together across all generations. You know, one of the challenges is like, well, is it too loud? It might be too loud. So we might be adjusting volumes. We might be adjusting lights. I was talking to Bob when I came in. Bob's like, hey, can you bring the lights up a little bit? I'm falling asleep. And so, Bob, we'll work on it. All right? Because we want to be present and available and serve all generations. So does that mean we might sing some older songs in these services too? Yeah, but those songs are so good. They're so good. And like one of the things that people, this is just behind the curtain a little bit. Sometimes people say like, well, if you're singing older songs, then your guests are going to be alienated. And my thought is like, if they've never been to church, how do they know it's an old song? They don't know. They're all new songs. For them, as somebody who's never been to church, to that, it's like they come in and we start singing and it's just group karaoke. I was like, what is happening here? And we have to teach them. We have to walk with them to help them understand. Like, we're not just karaokeing, if that's a verb. I don't know. We are worshiping Jesus. And so when we sing songs that maybe aren't our favorite songs, you know what I do? I work here, and we sing songs that I don't relate to. You know what I do? I shut up and worship Jesus. If I don't like the words of a song, it's like, that's fine. I'm just going to put my hands up, and I'm going to praise Jesus. I'm going to sing my own song. It's going to be great. And nobody can hear me because I'm in the front row. So if that's your nerve, like, fill this front row, please. But we want to welcome people of all generations because the church is strong when we're united together. So please welcome them next week. And then also creating spaces. And, you know, when we moved to Linwood, we have been investing in our adult worship space. We've been investing in our kids' gathering spaces. But we haven't done anything for our youth space yet. And so after we get occupancy, which, please, Lord Jesus, right? I mean, soon and very soon, we are going to see that building. I think that's how that song goes. But we're ever closer. And after we get occupancy, we are going to turn the fellowship hall. We're going to make that a dedicated, another worship venue that the youth will use for their worship gatherings on Wednesdays. And so we're going to invest in that. But we're also, we want to make space by participation, by partnering with people and joining ministry teams. And in the program, I told you, we're going to be using this program. In the program, there's this sheet of paper right here. One of the things that we want to make sure that you as a church are aware of is like, what are our kids and youth doing? What are they talking about? How can I pray for them? And then maybe, hopefully, how can you partner with them? Because there's events and there's activities to get involved in. And like, I can't be there every week, but I can drive somebody to youth conference. I can drive to winter camp. I can show up at an event and just kind of help make sure that, you know, everything is coordinated. And I want to be a part of it. I want to partner with youth and kids. And on your Discover card, there's a space on there where it's talking about youth and kids. And I want to encourage you to read through this. And if you're like, you know, I need to get involved, then partner with youth and kids. I want to share a story with you about my friend John. We'll call him John because that's his name. And John is in his 70s, and his wife came to him one day and said, we're joining the kids team. And John was reluctant. I don't know if you heard this, but John was in his 70s. And still is. Don't worry about John. But he's in his 70s, and he was reluctant because he, as he was telling me the story, he's like, I don't really know what I have to offer these kids. But he served, and he was present. And there was a young girl in the group that he was in the toddler's room, and she's really standoffish to adults. And so John knows this, and so he's there, and he's present, and he's playing with her, and like talking with her, and helping her throughout the gathering. And you know, several weeks later, he's down in the lobby, and this girl and her family come by, and remember, she's standoffish to adults, and she's just running right by, and then stopped because she recognized John, and turned around, gave him a hug. Why did she do that? John is huggable. I'll give him that. But it's also because he was present in her life. There are people in my life that I grew up with, that I see them at Costco sometimes, and there are times where like they were my kids' teachers when I was a kid. I just want to give them a hug. Like, Rich, it's so good to see you. But I'm 36 years old, and it's Costco, right? Like, that would be weird. But the impact that he has made in my life is longer than just the hour that he was in that class. And we can have that kind of impact in the life of young people now for the next generation. I want to ask you to partner with the next generation. We're making room at the table. One of the greatest ways we can do that is to actually be at the table with our young people. So if that's you, like, I'm in. I want to partner with kids and youth. I don't know what. I just want to know more. I want to get involved. Then please, on your card, let us know. Where do you want to jump in? Where do you want to serve? And there's all these different goals and projects that they're going to be working on throughout the year. Be praying for those because these goals are bigger than what we can do in our own strength. We need Jesus to help us do this stuff. All right? So are we making room for all generations? The next one is, are we making room for the marginalized? And there are people in our region that we ignore, that they become invisible. And I'm not just talking about people that we kind of know or don't really know their name, but it's like, they're on the margin of my life. I'm talking about the poor, people with disabilities, homeless people. Are we making room for them in our community, in our life? Are we making room? Because Jesus said to go make disciples, and he's talking about all people. And there's this parable that Jesus shares in the Gospel of Luke about this wealthy man who's throwing this big party. And he sends out invites, and all his friends are like, yeah, totally, I'll go. And so he prepares, and then he sends out the note, like, hey, the party's ready. And all his friends came up with these excuses on why they couldn't go. So what did the king do, the wealthy man do? He didn't just like sit down and throw a pity party and eat all the cake by himself. No, what does he do? It tells us in Luke 14, he said, go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told his servant, go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in so that my house may be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. This master, this wealthy landowner, this king, whoever he was, had space available. So he's like, I want to throw a party because I have reason to celebrate. So there should be people to celebrate. Do we have reason to celebrate every day? Yes. If Jesus has rescued you, you have a reason to celebrate. Are we making room for the marginalized who are so easily forgotten? But can we celebrate with them? Share the good news of Jesus with them. And how can we do that? And there's a lot of ways that we've been encouraging people to do this. We have a group that you can actually sign up in the catalog, and they just went out last night, and Charlotte Thomas and Lynn Richardson, they lead this group where they go to these places where homeless people are congregating, and they give them food. It's a wonderful ministry. And Lynn was sharing a story just this morning about what an encounter she had last night, which was just able to bless people. That's one way to get involved, and I would encourage you, get involved. We partner with Union Gospel Mission in Seattle and the men's shelter and go and serve people down there, and those meals are tied to a gospel presentation chapel that's all together, and so we are helping the mission help people who are living on the streets, people who are struggling with addiction. We are coming alongside the marginalized and helping. We partner with an organization called Nourishing Network that helps kids in this Edmond school district who are either homeless or they don't have reliable food sources at home. So they make these backpacks, and they send the kids home with them over the weekend. So we've been partnering with them and giving them financial support to provide for the backpacks, but we can also go and help put those backpacks together and to serve. And I know some of us might be thinking, there's homeless kids in our region? Yes. There are over 600 homeless children in the Edmond School District. 600. We can serve them. We can love them. Are we making room for them at our tables? But what What if we intentionally said, you know what, we're going to go make a space for them? And one of the things that's been on my heart for years and years is multiplication. Because I don't want to just build bigger churches. I want to have more churches. More churches throughout our region. And my hope, when people say, what's the vision for Creekside? Honestly, the only thing I say is, I want to be a gospel influence in Snohomish County. I want the people of Snohomish County to be impacted by the ministry of Creekside Church because we're going to them. We're not waiting for them to show up and come to us. So how can we go to them? Because there are people on the margins who desperately need Jesus. And maybe they don't feel comfortable coming to a Sunday morning. So why should we just replicate that? Let's get creative. Let's take these tables that we saw in Acts chapter 2, these communities, and take them to the people. And one of the things that's been flourishing over the last few years, as people are creating these fresh expressions of the church, is community dinners, where they sit down, prepare a meal, and invite the community at community centers, not just to the church, not just put up a sign and say, hey, free dinner here on Thursday, but to go to the rec centers, to go to the community gathering spots, and to say, we have a dinner here for you. And these dinners, they sing some songs, they have a gospel presentation, talk about Jesus, and build relationship. The greatest asset that we have as a church is not our buildings, it's our relationships. Are we willing to make relationships with the marginalized? Are we willing to make disciples with people who might make us feel uncomfortable, people who might feel inconvenient? The mission is not about our convenience. The Army, no, I was never in the Army, but I'm gathering. When they're told their mission, they don't then report back to their commanding officer, I got something else going on that day. They do it. Jesus gave us a mission. And we need to take that mission personally. So are we making room for the marginalized? And I'm investigating, how could we as Creekside do these community dinners? And I'm asking you today, would you investigate with me? Are you interested in helping figure out how we can do this? To be a gospel influence, not just on Sunday morning for a few hours, but throughout the week, throughout our region. And if that's something that you're interested in, could you just mark on your card, there's a place that says, I'm interested in community dinners. You're not committing to anything, but I want to know if you want to investigate this with me. How can we be a gospel influence throughout our region in reaching the marginalized? Because there are so many people who have so much need. And we have the greatest response to that need in the gospel, but we can also meet the physical needs as well. So let me know on your card. And then also, are we making room at the table for people we know and love? Jesus has blessed us with all kinds of relationships. Are we making room for them? Inviting them into our life, inviting them into our actual table, eating meals with them, spending time with them, building a relationship with them. As I just said, the greatest asset we have to offer people is relationship. Relationship with us, but also relationship with Jesus. And one of the things that breaks my heart is when people come to Creekside for a little while, and they're like, I'm not really connecting. And they leave. Are we making room for them? And maybe they're already following Jesus, but you know what? We still need to disciple people who are already following Jesus to make room for them. We do not have to do life alone. And that's why we talk about groups so much throughout the year, is because we want people to do life together. But I also want to encourage you, if you're looking around and you're like, oh man, where did so-and-so go? Like, I haven't seen them in a while. Reach out to them. They might be experiencing a great need, and they don't know how to ask for help. Reach out to them. Oh, but if I reach out to them, that might be inconvenient. Yeah, it is. But Do we love them enough to be inconvenienced? Reach out. But then the people that we know who aren't yet following Jesus, we need to reach out to them as well. One of the ways that we want to encourage people to think about the mission and take it personally is think about the table as a mission space. And I'm going to just be real honest with you right now. This is the cheesiest thing I have ever done. As your pastor, I'm ready for this. But I wanted to give you something today to think about the mission, to think about your table, to think about the people you know and love who don't yet know Jesus. So we made everybody placemats. And you're like, that's ridiculous. I know. But I want you to talk about it. And even if you make fun of me all day today, you're talking about it. But what is the purpose of this? We laminated it. Because just like we write names down on the communion tables, what if you took this home and in your household, whether you're single, you just took a moment and said, okay, who are the people in my life? Write their name down at your house. Think about them when you sit down to eat. If you're married, husband and wife, write your names down. Living with roommates, get them together. Let's talk about who needs Jesus that we can be praying for. You're parenting kids, and sit down and talk to them about their friends at school. Talk about the mission and take it personally to say, how can we serve their family and love them? So everybody today, not just one per household, every single person in your household, please take one of these before you leave. They're going to be out in the lobby, and we're going to give these out. And if you never actually use this as a placemat, I'm just going to cry. So no, I understand that, but I want you to take it home and to think about it because it's your mission and it's your table, and we need to take the mission personally. So please take one of these before you go, and talk about it. Don't just leave it in the bottom of your car and then you step on it and all kinds of stuff, and then you're like, oh, here's the kids learning notes too. Oh, whoa. I didn't know you were talking about Zacchaeus 3 months ago. Whatever it is, talk about it. Work it out together. And then also, are we making room globally? And there's 3 ways that we can make room globally. We could pray for our missionaries, something we've been doing as part of our communion time, but we're going to continue doing that. We're going to start experimenting with service order moving forward, but we're going to continue praying for missionaries. But you can also give to missions. Throughout all of our financial challenges over the last couple of years, by the grace of God and by your guys' faithfulness and generosity, we are turning that around, and it is so encouraging to say, okay, God is helping us and helping us move forward. But the missions giving through all of that has remained strong. Thank you for giving and supporting missionaries. And if you're not yet supporting missionaries, I want to encourage you as we talk about these missionaries on the screens, don't just let it be like, oh yeah, that's cool. They're in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But to say, Lord, how would you have me pray for them? How would you have me support them? And maybe you have some margin in your budget to say, I could pick up a missionary and support them every month. But we also do special offerings. And so we have a Christmas missions offering that we're getting ready for. And our goal this year is $125,000. And, we do projects. We're going to build a home in Roatan. We're going to continue to build that Teen Challenge Center that's in Uruguay. We send teams to Mexico, and they have different projects down there. Young Life Capernaum, helping families get to camp. There's all kinds of ways that we support missions and on these different projects. And I want to encourage you to pray about, Lord, what would you have me do for the Christmas missions offering? Now, that's the key here with that prayer is not, Lord, what can I afford to do for the Christmas missions offering? Lord, what would you have me do? Because every year, my wife and I, we talk about it, and we start talking about setting the goal, and she's always setting goals a little higher than I am. Kathy just has more faith than me. And I'm always like, all right, Kath, let's do it. We're trusting the Lord. And every year, we've been able to meet that goal, and often we've been able to exceed that goal. Because the Lord provides in amazing, weird ways. So pray, Lord, what would you have me do? We'll be talking more about the Christmas missions offering in the coming weeks. But you can also go. We just had a team come back from Uruguay. We're going to go again. We're going to send a team to Roatan, send teams to Mexico, send teams to Young Life Camp. There's all kinds of ways to go and to be a part of these different activities. And so begin praying now. Lord, would you have me go on one of these opportunities? And if you will, on your card, there's a place that says, pray, give, go. Will you commit to say, I want to make room for the table globally. I want to make room locally as well as globally. And so let us know. All of these steps, all of these things that you're marking, these are commitments of faith. These are things we're saying, like, I don't know all the answers yet, but I want to learn. I want to investigate. I want to figure this out because I want to take the mission personally. And I want to make room at the table. So as you are marking these this week, I'm going to be praying for you, and we're going to be praying together. Lord, what would you have us do? How can we be a gospel influence throughout our region to reach people who don't yet know Jesus? I'm going to ask you to join me in that we would do this together and trust the Lord together. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your faithfulness and your provision. Lord, thank you that you have invited us to your table to live with you, to do life in your community. And Father, I pray that you would help us to trust you and to seek you in all things. And Father, if there are those among us who are not yet following Jesus, I ask that your Spirit, Lord, would draw them to Jesus, more than to the cool stuff that we want to do here at this church. But Lord, that your Spirit would draw them to what Jesus has already done for them in laying his life down for them. And so, Father, we thank you for the opportunity we have to walk with you and to serve your kingdom. So help us, Lord, to have your vision, not our small goals, but Lord, your vision to reach people that we don't know yet with your great and wonderful news. For your glory, Lord. Amen.